Okay, so make sure that you take detailed notes, and then at the end of this video, then you will upload a PDF of your notes. So first, we want to make sure that we are reading the directions. We are focusing on finding an exponential equation from 2 points. So let's go ahead and take a minute to review. So exponential equations are in this form. And the A is going to represent what we refer to as the initial amount. And the way that you can find that is when x is equal to 0, um, and it's the A term. All right. So depending on what you're given, there's a few ways to decipher what your A is going to be. And your B value is what the repeated multiplication is. So it is maybe like your rate of change. It's the repeated multiplication. Okay. So if we look in terms of our vocabulary, let's take a look and see what we have. So common variables and vocabulary: initial amount, also known as your starting number, is going to be representative of the A value. All right. The multiplier, the rate of change, is the B value. The percentage rate in terms of percent is going to be your R, but we also want it in decimal form. So we also recognize that depreciation is decay, in that B value is going to be between 0 and 1. And if it's increasing or grows, the B value is going to be bigger than 1. So sometimes we have to find the B value, and that is going to be 1 plus the rate. Now, the R can either be positive or negative depending on whether or not you are having a decay or an increase. So remember that when you go 1 plus a negative R, that is the same thing as 1 minus R. So sometimes you can see um, the B written as 1 plus R, or sometimes you can get that as 1 minus R, depending on if it's growth or decay. So let's take a look. Here is a layout, a very procedural step um, with regards to your directions. So if you are supposed to find an exponential equation with 2 points, these are the steps that you're going to do. So we always want to start out with your basic equation. And then remember that you're going to have 2 points. You're going to have an x1 and a y1. That would indicate your first point. And then you're going to have a second point. Okay, so you have 2 points. So you're replacing the x and a y from point 1. So that would be like your x1, y1 into y equals abx. And then you solve for A. We're going to box that answer when we're done. We're going to come back to it. Then we're going to do this again. We're going to replace the x and the y from point 2 into this new form. And we're going to solve for A again. And then we're going to box that again when we're done. Then we're going to set both equations equal to each other and solve for B. So basically, we're going to take our box, this first box, and set it equal to the second box. And then we get to solve for B. And then we get to box our B. Then we're going to take our B value and plug it either into this one or this one in order to solve for A. Then we're going to box our A, and then we're going to write our equation with our A and our B values. So keep this in mind. Right now, I don't expect that you would have this memorized, but we're going to be able to follow directions. So let me give you an example. So here are our 2 points. we are supposed to write down y equals abx. So I'm going to write down y equals abx. And step 1 says to replace the x and the y from point 1 into that form. So I'm going to say that I'm going to use the point 0, 2, and I am going to replace the y and the x with the point. Remember, this is the x and this is the y. So I've got not only the y is going to become 2 equals, and then we've got a, b, and then we're replacing the x with 0. All right, because that's the x and the y that we're replacing. Now we need to go ahead, and it says we're done with step 1, solve for a. So we're going to go ahead and simplify. So remember that b to the 0 power is just 1. So we've got 2 is equal to a times b to the 0 power is just 1. So again, a times 1 is just a, so a is equal to 2. So we're going to box this, a equals 2. All right. Now, then what we're going to do is we're done with step 2, and then step 3 says we're going to take that second point and do the same thing. All right. So we're going to take our second point. I'll do it in purple. And I'm writing our y equals abx. And so I'm replacing the y with 8. The a is going to stay the a, and I have b stays the b, and then I'm replacing the x with 2. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, it says I replaced it, now solve for a. In other words, we need to get a by itself. Well, there's nothing I can simplify here. B squared is just b squared. So remember that this is a times b squared. So what I'm going to do to solve for a is divide by b squared to both sides. And I get an expression that a is equal to 8 over b squared. And I box it because I solve for a. See where it says solve for a, box when done. Now it says set both equations equal to each other and solve for b. So if we take a look at this, in this particular case, it's actually a little bit less work. We're saying that a is equal to 2. And here I am saying a is equal to 8 over b squared. So what you're doing is you're replacing the a. Okay, so here's the a. The a is equal to 2. So what I'm going to do is keep 8 over b squared equals, but instead of a, I'm going to replace a with 2. Now I am ready. So once I did that, I set the equations equal to each other and I'm solving for b. So let's just take a look at a couple of ways we could do this. We could do this 2 different ways. I'll show you 2 different methods to be able to do this. The first one is we don't want to have a denominator, so I could multiply both sides by b squared. If I multiply the left by b squared, I've also got to multiply the right by b squared. And b squared times this 8 over b squared is going to cancel, right? Because it's over 1. And so I've got 8 is equal to 2 times b squared is just 2b squared. And then what's going to happen is I am going to divide by 2 because I'm trying to solve for b. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. So I get b squared is equal to 4. And then hoping that you remember this idea that when you have b squared, you have to take the inverse of that. So we would have to take the square root. Okay, we're trying to get b by itself. So then that means that we're taking the square root of 4 and we end up getting 2. And think about what that means. It says b squared is something times itself gives me 4. So 2 times 2 gives me 4, so I'm good. Now let's just double check another way to do this. I could do like proportions and kind of like cross multiply here. 8 times 1 is 8 is equal to, remember when you're doing this, you have no more fractions. And then here I am going, do orange, 2 times b squared. And no matter what you do, whether you do it this method over here or this method that I just showed you with cross multiplication, we still end up with 8 equals 2b squared. So we still have to solve for b. And so we get 4 is equal to b squared, take the square root, and we get 2 is equal to b. So according to the directions, we were just supposed to box b. And then it says plug in the b value into either step 2 or 4 to solve for a. But the difference is we already solved for a because we already said a was 2. So, but let's just say that we didn't know that. We could plug it back in into this equation right here. So let me just tell you where we are so far. We know that the a that we found from that original step was 2. And the b we just found was also 2. So that would be my equation. But let's say that this first part wasn't so easy. Let's say that we had to like plug in 8 over b squared is equal to a. Well, if we know that b is 2, so we would have 8 over 2 squared. So we have 8 over 4 equals 2. So we have another way to establish that a is equal to 2. So again, we know we're right. Okay. So then what we're doing is write your equation with the a and b values. So again, this was the a and this is the b. You should have with you the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 so that you could do this, you know, procedurally, step one at a time. So what we're going to do again is write y equals abx. I'm going to go a little bit faster this time. This is going to be your x and this is going to be your y. So I've got 6 is equal to, we don't know what the a is, we don't know what the b is, but we know that the x is -1. And we are supposed to solve for a. Before we do that, we need to simplify. Okay, so let's take a look and simplify what that means. It means 6 is equal to a over b to the first power, right? So remember that negative exponent means that that is going to be a fraction. So we just need to finish solving for a. So let's take a look how we would do that. We could multiply both sides by b. So I have 6b is equal to a. And that's all I'm doing. I just had to get a by itself. Okay, so again, looking at the steps, we replaced x and the y from point 1. And then we also solved for a and we boxed it when we were done. So this part right here is step 1. And this was step 2. Now we're going to do step 3, which is the same thing, but we're going to use the other point. So we're going to go y equals abx. This time I'll color code it. I'll use a light blue. Remember that this is the x and this is the y. So 12 is equal to ab to the -2. So what we're going to do, again, we always have to simplify. before we can solve. So 12 is equal to a over b squared. Okay, this negative tells you that it's a fraction, so it goes in the denominator. Now we need to go ahead and solve for a, so we're going to multiply by b squared. That cancels out, but then we've got to multiply this side by b squared. So we end up getting 12 times b squared is equal to a. And that's all I had to do. I just had to solve for a. So this was step 4. Now step 5, if we go back and look, set both equations equal to each other and solve for b. So remember what this is saying. A is equal to 6b and a is equal to 12b. So what I'm doing is replacing the a with what they equal. So I'm taking 6b and I'm replacing a with 6b, or you could do it the other way, replace a with 12b squared. But either way, we've got 6b is equal to 12b squared. Okay, we're setting these guys equal to each other. So now we just go ahead and solve for b. So what we're going to do here is I am going to divide by b. So b divided by b gives me a 1. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. So I get 6 is equal to 12 b squared. Think about what that means. B squared over b. Using your rules of exponents says b, and it's 2 minus 1. So I get b to the first. So I just basically get a b. Think about what that's saying. It's saying you've got b times b over b. If you were to simplify that, these would cancel and you're left with b. So this reduces to b. So we need to go ahead and divide by 12. And we end up finding that b is equal to 1/2. So we're going to box that. And this is step 5. Okay, going back up here. Now we are plugging in the b value into either step 2 or 4. So again, we know that our b value is 1/2. So what I'm going to do is write this down. Y equals ab to the x. Our b value is 1/2. I'm going to box our final answer, but we don't have it yet. I'm going to take my 1/2 and I'm either going to plug it into that spot for step 2 or this one. So it's either or. Personally, I think it's easier just to go back to my original one. So I have 6b equals a. The b we found was 1/2. 6 times 1/2 is 3. So my a value is 3. And then I put that in that form. So again, write your equation with the a and the b values, and that. Okay, this is a you try. I would like you to use your notes and follow each step one at a time and see how well you do. Okay, so here we go. The first thing we want to do for step 1 is to take our point and replace the y and the x with the y and the x from this point. So I'm going to color code it for you. The y is 15 is equal to a, b, and then the x in this portion is 0, right? The x is here and the y is here. And then what we are supposed to do for step 2 is to solve for a. So what we're going to do is to simplify, which gives us 15 is equal to a times 1. Remember that anything to the 0 power is 1. So a times 1 is just a. So we have a is equal to 15. Okay, so I'm going to box that. Okay, now let's see, this was step 1, this was step 2. Step 3 says we're going to do the same thing again. Sorry about my pen. But this time we're going to use this other point. Okay, so y is 240 is equal to a, b, and then my x is 2. And again, I'm solving for a, which means on step 4, I need to divide by b squared because I have to get a by itself. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. So a is equal to 240 over b squared. Okay, so that was step 4. Step 5 then says to set these two guys equal to each other. And I want you to think what this means. It's like a is 15 and a is also 240 over b squared. So when it comes to step 5 and you're setting them equal to each other, you're getting rid of the a and you're setting these two guys equal to each other. So you are trying to have an equation with just one letter in it. Now I showed you a couple of techniques to try and solve for b. So I'm just going to go proportions. And so if we're going to go and multiply, we get 15b squared is equal to, remember when you do a proportion, you no longer have any fractions. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead, divide by 15, because we got to solve for b. And then I'm going to get, I'm running out of room here, I write too big. I get b squared is equal to, let me just do my math over here. I don't have a calculator. I'm just going to show you some long division. 15 goes into 24 one time, minus 15. That gives you 9 left. So think about this. If we count by 15s, think about it as money. So 15, $30, $45, $60, $75, and then $90. So that's 6. And then so 6 times 15 is 90. And so that's 16. So b squared is equal to 16. Then I'm going to take the square root and I get b is equal to 4. Now this is important. We want to be able to box that. We know that that's the b value. The last step is, well, the next step is to take our b value, and remember we said either a is 15 or a is 240 over b squared. Well, if we already know what our a value is, that saves us a lot of work. Remember, you are ultimately trying to find the A and the B. Well, we just found the B was 4. And on our initial time, we already found that A is equal to 15. So I can just put the 15 in there. Or I could, according to the last step, calculate A by going 240 divided by B squared. So 240 divided by b squared, b is 4. So 4 squared is 16. 240 over 16, that gives me 15. And then that's what goes there. Your choice, whether or not you pick the easiest one or if you plug it into the second one right here, your choice. The bottom line is you need to be able to come up with the equation. All right, let's try the next one. All right, so number 2, go ahead and try, and then we'll go over that. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit faster here. Remember that we've got y equals ab to the power of x. I am going to plug in the first point, 0, 6, which means I get 6 is equal to ab to the 0 power, which means I need to simplify that. B to the first power is 1, so that gives me a is equal to 6. Well, that's nice and dandy. Remember that my ultimate answer is going to be y equals a b to the power of x. Think about that. I already found a, so I'm just going to go ahead and plug it in there. So step 2, well, that's step 2 right here. Step 3 is to do this again, y equals abx, but we're going to use a different point. We're going to use this point. So 6144, so 6,144 is equal to ab to the 5th, which means if I were to solve for a, I'm going to divide by b to the 5th. So I get a is equal to 6,144 over b to the 5th, and then I box it. Again, just to show you what I was doing, I'm dividing by b to the 5th. I divide this by b to the 5th, and that's what a equals. So that was step 4. 5 says to set them equal to each other. Remember that if a equals 6 and a equals this, then that means 6 equals 6144 over b to the 5th. We are solving for b. So again, if I were to cross multiply, 6 times b to the 5th is 6b to the 5th is equal to 6144. So I'm going to get my calculator. I'm going to divide by 6. I had a better pen. So I'm going to open up my calculator real quick. I get 6,144 divided by 6 gives me 1,024. So b to the 5th is equal to 1,024. You will need a calculator to be able to do this at this point. You want to take the 5th root of 1,024. So you're going to have to find your calculator. Let's see. We go. It ends up being b is equal to 4. If b is equal to 4, box it. Remember that that's the whole point of what you were trying to find. And because we plugged in a at the time that we found it, we're done. However, remember what the last thing was. If you didn't find a is equal to 6, what you could do is then take this value right here. It says a is 6,144 over b to the 5th power. So 6,144, 4 to the 5th power is 1,024. So if you were to take that calculation in your calculator, you end up getting 6, and then that's where we get the 6. All right, last one. If you could go ahead and try that. Hopefully you are getting better at these. Step 1, y equals abx. Replace the x and the y. So you get ab to the 0 power, which means a is equal to, remember, b to the 0 power is 1, so a is equal to 10. Remember, as long as you find out what a is, that's half the battle, because you want to know that the a value goes here. Then what you have is step 3, which says you take y equals ab to the x. You replace the x and the y with the 2 and the 160. And now we're going to, again, divide both sides by b squared. And so we get a is equal to 160 over b squared. That was step 4. So we're going to box it. Okay. Step 5 says to set those two things equal to each other. So I get 10 is equal to 160 over b squared. Cross multiply, set yourself up. 10b squared is equal to 160. Divide by 10. B squared is equal to 16. That tells you that b is equal to the square root of 16, which is 4. Box it. I can take my b and plug it in here, and I get to box my answer.